Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone, wherever and whenever you are. I am Benjamin coming to you from San Diego, California.
I'm Ethan Castle coming to you from South San Francisco, California. Welcome to episode 211 of Americans Watching the Footy, our 2024 preliminary finals recap. But I guess before all of that, we kind of have just some general housekeeping, and I guess you could call this some
News, everyone!
So we have yet to hear about a few key players in the trade market and free agency and stuff, but sounds like Ivan Soldo possibly heading to St. Kilda. Is that correct?
Looks to be on track with the exit meeting coming by the time this episode is out. We'll see how it is in terms of my coursework and my site work at America's Brownlow. But yeah, we called this with Ivan Soldo, I think about a month ago, if not longer, that the Saints might be the right type for him, especially once they delisted Tom Campbell. And yes, we got a bit of a backup ruck carousel here. Melbourne's keen on Campbell, so sorry to former basketballer Tom Fullerton.
I think this is a perfect fit. You can bounce both him and Marshall between the ruck and the forward 50. You could even throw him into defense if needed. I think this is awesome.
I mean, you think back to the successes with the Marshall and Ryder duo from, I'm thinking like 2020 to 22. This all fits. Now all we need is Dan Hannebury coming back and being profane.
As we currently record this, the Brownlow count will begin in about 4.5 hours. I think I'll post my little Brownlow drinking game I came up with, although I won't be able to reveal some of the details about it because that would reveal votes for America's Brownlow, which will begin a little under 24 hours after that and might actually be done before this episode airs. I would think this episode will be done in time, but don't mean to put pressure on you. And then at some point after, probably after the grand final, we'll do some sort of like analysis of our votes and stuff. Like, I can tell you in advance, like that 40-plus disposal game, who was it, Sam Flanders had in that ugly-ass Suns loss to St. Kilda at Marvel. He's going to get a bunch of votes, and I'm going to try not to be mad about it because I know it's coming, but I'm going to be mad about it.
I'm also thinking Nick Martin's 44 when Essendon barely beat the Saints.
I'm sure there will be some Lockie Whitfield volume games that get unnecessary love, maybe Dean Zorko. And I'm just like trying to prepare myself for that, because I've known the whole year it's coming, but I still don't like it.
The thing is, I can't be mad about this stuff. I'm just going to be fascinated by it. I'll just be like, okay, this is what they saw at field level. And when you're field level, supposed to have more of a bird's eye view, just a spectator view, like you will on the broadcast usually, yeah, I get why those sorts of volume things stand out more. You could talk all you want about the merits or lack thereof of umpires being the ones to vote on the Brownlow and how more stock should be put in the Lee Matthews and the Coaches Award, whatever. We're doing this, and I'm honestly going to enjoy it.
I'm going to try to do a few different things here. I'm going to compare our votes to theirs, and I've come up with some rules for a drinking game tonight. Drink whenever a player does something silly. Drink whenever we have the exact same votes, 3, 2, 1 as the umpires. Drink whenever we don't have any of the same 3 players at all as the umpires. Drink whenever Brian gets a vote. And finish your drink when Brian gets 3 votes, which I think there are a couple of chances for. Also, you know what Brownlow thing I really do like? As much as I will complain about like the pacing of the program and how it takes way longer than it should, and it'll be like 6 a.m. here by the time it's done, when this should be like a 2-hour event, not a 3-hour event. You know what I do like on Brownlow night?
Is it the shit Brownlow questions?
Yes.
I mean, it's Josh Garlop. Are we surprised?
Adam Ferlor getting asked about North Korea is like the funniest thing ever.
You know what it makes me think of? It's like the reverse of an interview from Ilya Brizgalov or Mike Leach.
Yes, which I also love.
Rest in peace, Pirate.
I love super deep interviews that you aren't expecting, but I also love the exact opposite. And I'd also like maybe if someone asked a few Fosse questions. I don't know if I've explained Fosse questions on here before, but the late, great Oakland A's broadcaster Ray Fosse, when he would interview people after games, would usually ask a question that took about 45 seconds and had the answer somewhere buried within the question. Let me try to find a couple of them real quick as an example.
Please don't.
No, I need to share like one or two as a reference. Best Fosse questions. Found an old Athletics Nation post. You know, the previous at bat we were just talking about, you got a changeup that you took for ball 4. Of course, it was at the time with 2 outs. How much thinking about a changeup at that point and maybe going opposite field like you did, or just thinking opposite field the way you'd like to hit?
Yes, Ray. Is that the correct way to respond?
I think just yes is the correct answer, but that's one of my favorites. I mean, he's had some other great ones, but that's way, way up there. Also, because when you listen to a podcast, there's nothing you want to hear more about than a recap of other podcasts. You know, not long ago, I was 3 months behind on the shows I like to listen to. That's now down to like 2.5 weeks behind. And I learned that Mason Cox, you know that injury he had against Frio where he like looked like Gumby? Not the Monty Python Gumby, the green dude.
Okay, not bashing 2 bricks together.
Yes. He had like, an MCL injury and a concussion and maybe a ribcage injury or something. Well, he also partially tore his ACL.
Unit lost.
And didn't tell anyone. And that was just like between him and the club doctors, and they didn't want to reveal it until after the season ended. And then I think he went to get it operated on after the season ended. So there's that.
That's a very hockey thing.
Yes.
Well, I think it was, 2 consecutive playoffs, I think, 2016 and 17. Sharks legend Joe Thornton tore his ACL and MCL.
You have guys just playing through separated shoulders in the NHL. It's ridiculous. This is a similar comparison.
Speaking of separated shoulders, that's a prelim topic.
Oh yeah, I guess, or was it? I guess it was more dislocated, but
It was on the way.
It did not look how a shoulder was supposed to look. But that's in game 2. So I guess we'll start with the first prelim. Sydney 14-11-95 defeating Port Adelaide 8-11-59.
That actually is the first prelim.
Yeah. Unlike with a lot of other stuff, they actually played the first prelim first, which I guess was kind of cool.
I mean, the way that they're setting it up is just to have it so that the first prelim's on Friday to begin with. So because of the crossover, you got to work backwards really from the very beginning.
Anyway, Swans were pretty clearly the better team. Really took hold of this one in the second quarter. Isaac Heaney was excellent, and at this point is the clear leader for the Gary Ayers Award. He got 10 in both games, which I have minimal issue with.
It does, and remember, 50% boost for the grand final, so the Norm Smith medalist could easily get 15, as Bobby Hill did last year.
And so it's not over. There are a few other guys that are still mathematically alive. What do they do if there's a tie?
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
I mean, it seems like they're very willing to have awards shared in the AFL, and it's going to be fitting.
The two that really have a chance are Dane Zorko and Lachie Neal, and I guess Hugh McCluggage to a lesser extent.
Geez, spoilers. What about for our one Turkmen listener?
But what really stood out to me in this game was Ollie Florent. I thought this was his best game, or at least one of his best games of the year. His ability to kind of clean up at ground level towards the edge of their defensive 50 and then launch counterattacks was really important. He was only credited with 4 score launches, but I just thought it was one of his absolute best performances of the year in a game that was largely a total team effort. He stood out. Joel Amarty stood out. I'll let you talk more about him.
I was really happy for Amarty. I mean, I don't know why he's a guy that I gravitated to from the beginning. Maybe it's just because I was like, okay, this post-Buddy future, he may be like the least established of them, I guess. I was like, wanted to see what he could do. Then he had the bag of 9 this year and had gone so quiet. So firstly, to see him have enough defensive and disrupting jobs and then to get the goal in the prelim was one thing. And then to continue that work, but also actually finish with some marks and still have the ground level roving was really nice. And I think that he could end up in some important spots next week against a compromised ruck group as well. So something to watch there. I mean, Amartey takes some hitouts. I would say more so that's Hayden McLean's job, but you'll imagine they'll both get some time in the grand final.
Jake Lloyd was really sharp too. Lloyd, I just liked his involvement all over the oval. Only 11 tackles for James Rowbottom. And then Justin McInerney looked so much more like he was up to speed. You know, that first game against GWS, you could tell there was an adjustment. And while it was certainly beneficial for him to be in there, you know, he was in that like ramp up period still. And in this game, he had 7 marks and 2 assists.
Was looking at the tables for both James and Charlie Rowbottom regarding tackles. Charlie got 11 in round 1 this year. Holy cow, James had 5 games now with 11 or more tackles. He had 16 in the round 10 win over the Blues.
You see why I like this guy?
A small to medium-sized player, but just willing to be as physical as anyone out there. I mean, those are the guys that we like in other sports as well. The hockey players who are on the smaller side, but get aggressive. I was thinking immediately of Scott Nickel, who played with the San Jose Sharks near the end of his career. I think he might have been a Blackhawk otherwise, maybe.
Also St. Louis, I think. Or no, Nashville. Definitely Nashville. But Alex DeBrinket's only 5'7"? Wow.
Actually, we're correct on all those teams so far, along with Buffalo and Calgary.
Who was the really short guy who was playing for the Blue Jackets a couple years ago? Oh, Nathan Gerby. 5'4".
Our parents' height.
Second shortest player of all time. The shortest was a goalie, which seems like really counterintuitive.
I know about this guy, Roy Shrimp Waters. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Like, that's the exact opposite of the, you know, what if they just put a 400-pound guy in goal? Well, nobody's done that, but they have put a 5'3" guy in there.
It's like the commercial with the walrus.
And yeah, he did make the Hall of Fame, and he had pretty amazing career numbers, so I get it. But yeah, James Rowbottom is really good, and
I think we're preaching to a pretty darn receptive choir here. And then he's also able to generate some of the clearances himself and just be there off stoppage is another thing. We saw a peak performance from these Swans in a lot of respects. They weren't their most accurate. They did turn off the gas a bit in the fourth quarter. This margin could have easily gotten out more than 36, but the point was made. The win was secure. Also, a 148-point turnaround from, a couple months ago? The largest turnaround within a season in a head-to-head matchup since 2005. Also, 15 of the Swans' 23 had not defeated Poort in their careers.
A couple other things. The Swans, similar to Geelong 2 weeks ago, gave Poort a lot of trouble by controlling uncontested play. They ended up with 64 more uncontested possessions, and that really just took away a lot of what Poort wanted to do.
It's rebounded with ease as well. I'm not sure whether to pin that more on the Swans' effort and their preparation or just Poort having a poor setup. I would imagine the situation is a bit of both. And then you knew that in this game, whichever of the secondary and tertiary talls reigned supreme would bring their team with them. That was Amartey rather than Brandon Zerk-Thatcher.
Also, Will Hayward, Hayden McLean, and Logan McDonald all got theirs, and just Sydney's talls marked really well altogether. I thought those Swans rebounds were interesting because Nick Blakey never had like one of those signature long runs, but he still was kicking pretty well. The guy who really impressed me in the way they rebounded was Florent much more. And for what was realistically a pretty disappointing year by his standards, in a year where like pretty much every other Swans thing has gone pretty well, this makes up for a fair amount of it.
It's weird that you put Hayward in there along with those talls because dude's 6'1", but I get how he plays that sort of disrupting job, how he can play defensive forward. We like those guys who can kind of defy their height and play above their size. I'm thinking hopefully more of that from Mitch Owens next year for the Saints, for example. Speaking of defensive forwards, Aliir did what he could, but Luke Parker had an excellent job on him in the second quarter. And if he does go away after this year, the Swans are going to miss that a lot. One defensive forward is one thing. If he can have two, I mean, that's a very rare luxury in the modern AFL.
I think Alir gets my nod for the non-existent finals polished turd at this point.
I mean, it's slim pickings. I didn't like Travis Boak's game, even though he did kick 1-1 from 22 and have 2 assists. I thought a lot of that felt hollow when he had a couple pretty bad turnovers by Foot. I had more than a couple, honestly.
I thought the horny one in Rosie had some moments, but yeah, I think it's Alir. Jace Burgoyne was quality again, but he's had better, like the week before. You know who I didn't mention that I really liked for Sydney, even though I think he only had like 10 disposals? Because I think I noticed every single one of them, and it wasn't quite in his usual role, was James Jordan. I just thought his impact per touch, like everything he did meant something. There wasn't any sort of like filler in there. He wasn't doing like a lot of tagging along the wing. I thought maybe he would have had a role to slow Burgoyne some.
We were talking about that as a possibility. He ended up just playing freely. What do you think he does in the grand final? Like, I know this is preview talk.
I think he tags more in the middle. But yeah, out of his 10 disposals, a score involvement and 5 intercepts. That's a pretty damn good ratio. And 8 of those 10 efficient, 4 contested possessions. The sort of thing that, isn't going to show up in your award votes. But like, I would think he had multiple plays that whenever the Swans did their film review, probably pops up.
I said earlier that this was about a peak Swans game, but then I remembered, oh, wait, Justin McInerney is still kind of getting a feeling for the game again. It's his second game back. I think 2 weeks in a row will actually do him plenty of good this time. And if you've got that going, geez, I mean, you wonder why the Swans are regarded as highly as they are. I mean, for the whole season, but going into this final, I'd imagine they're pretty good-sized favorites. Haven't really looked at the lines yet.
Not so much thinking about like the point spread, just thinking about like odds-wise, I would have to give them about a 75% chance of winning this thing. There is this voice I've had in the back of my mind that's like, well, the minor premier has gone on to win it the last 3 seasons. Maybe it's time for someone to shake that up. But, they've just had the look of the best team for all but a couple of rounds this year.
I know it was a medical sub for the Swans, and that seemed more precautionary with Logan McDonald taking a seat early in the fourth quarter. Robbie Fox came in. I think for the grand final, if Callum Mills is healthy, you take Fox out and bring Mills back in, demote Campbell to the sub.
And then Taylor Adams stuck out. The West Australian, everyone's favorite publication, said McDonald's going to be good to go.
I mean, they'd have a vested interest in a Westerner.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I mentioned that.
The Swans are the first club in VFL, AFL history to make a grand final in a season where they lost a game by more than 100, because 100 has happened before.
Interesting.
1945, Carlton lost by 100, I think, to Essendon early on that season, and then they defeated who else but South Melbourne in the bloodbath grand final. However, I don't believe anybody has lost by 119 and gone on to win the flag.
Yeah, I thought Richmond really had a shot at it, even after that loss to Brisbane. I really thought.
I mean, I don't think we learned all that much about the Swans this game, and I think that's okay.
My main takeaways were Florent, who, again, deserves a ton of credit. Okay, he tied for second most Gary Ayers votes in this game with Warner. I'm fine with that. I didn't think Warner was great. I thought he was fine, but I also just set such a high bar for him. And the dominance by Sydney's Hulls collectively was certainly striking. Poort, we'll talk more about them during the post-mortem segment. It's a weird spot to be in where most clubs would be very happy to be where they are, but with the way they got their pants pulled down at home in their first final and just some of the instability this season, it's weird. I think if you were to measure all 18 clubs on how are they feeling at the end of the season, you'd definitely put them behind Geelong in the 2 grand finalists. I would even consider maybe saying that Hawthorn probably has a happier outlook than them just because of the power of expectations.
Power of expectations, was that intentional?
No, that was completely unintentional.
It's just Poort has been in this spot before. Now They have some younger elements. It's clear, and I think it was clear from the moment they brought the guys in, that bringing in mediocre defenders didn't fix your mediocre defense problem.
Mediocre?
I mean, the thing that I saw echoed a lot online was just like the moves they made last offseason were pretty underwhelming. And unfortunately, Asava didn't do a ton, and it was a rough outing for Brandon Zerk-Thatcher.
I mean, the biggest positive in defense this year is Logan Evans. Holy cow.
Yeah, and he's less of a intercept defender and much more of just get things moving, especially down the wing. And I do really like him, and he's one of the biggest reasons that, like, if Dan Houston is gone, I'm not concerned. Like, Logan Evans is right up there in terms of players who made a quick impression on me with someone who kind of performs a bit of a similar role in Lawson Humphreys. Reliable. They also happen to operate in the same area on the ground, just like jumped in and right away looked like they belonged immediately. Any other closing thoughts? Because I have a silly one.
See about the futures of Charlie Dixon and Travis Boak at the club. I think Boak is obviously more likely to go on than Dixon is. Felt like a kind of a sad farewell. They're just like a realization, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get any better than this in the future. It's a guy we like. I mean, we've talked about how we like Charlie Dixon, and I know that's less popular, I think.
Yeah, but he's also, like, you look at when we entered the footy world.
Honestly, it was at the peak of his powers. I think he was a 2020 All-Australian.
Poort was very good in 2020. When you're first watching, you don't so much notice the midfield guys as you notice the guy who kicks the goals.
Also, he had that ridiculous one-handed catch.
I mean, right away, you knew, like, Geelong's on, I get to watch Gryan. Essendon, I get to watch North, I got to watch Ben Brown. And with Port Adelaide, I get to watch Charlie Dixon. Like, he was the one who really stood out.
We were so innocent then.
All right, are you ready for my silly thing?
Fire away.
So I saw a Crows fan call them Poort, like Poort, and it got me thinking more about the Oort cloud. And I'm just trying to figure out, somehow there needs to be like a Port cloud. And I don't know how to pull this off. And we definitely follow people that are way funnier than either of us that can come up with something good here. It seems like an Andrew Gigach thing, or maybe Daniel Cherney or something.
Okay, so the Oort cloud, that's where like a lot of comets originate, right?
Stuff on the kind of the periphery of the solar system. It's a spherical shell of icy objects. It is the source of most long period comets. It's just a fun thing to say, Oort. Like, there is a pitcher who was with the Red Sox and now with the Astros, Caleb Oort, but that's O-R-T. The double O makes it so much better. And it's just fun to say.
It made me think of, baseball players and coaches, Dane and Garth Orge, I-O-R-G.
Okay, I'm going in a different direction. Former Cal football offensive lineman. You're not... Yes!
That's another one. The long double O is a Dutch thing.
Yeah, it's funny. And especially, it seems like something like, Professor Frank probably talks about.
Well, you see, we're trying to find some better fullbacks in the Port cloud, but we're having a lot of trouble right now, and nothing we send out there ever comes back.
Flavin Glavin.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
And welcome back to Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle. Follow me on Twitter at Castle Media.
Follow our executive producer, his cat, Brian Harambe, on Instagram, a cat named Brian. I am Benjamin Castle. Follow me at BenjaminHK01. You can find all of our social media stuff with the handle Americans Footy including America's Brownlow Night, which will be coming first on YouTube and then everywhere else after that, targeting 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Tuesday.
Speaking of our executive producer, he's right here.
So, second prelim, that being Geelong 12-13-85, defeated by Brisbane 14-11-95. It feels like 12-13 has been a relatively common scoreline this year, if I'm not mistaken. I know that was the scoreline for both teams in the Anzac draw, but there were a few others as well, I think. But Geelong started inaccurately, got things together with a 7-goal-2 second, started out the third all right, and then, there was the cliff.
This is about as content as I could ever be with a close loss in a game of this magnitude, between it coming against an opponent that I really don't have anything against. Like, Dane Zorko can be a turd, but he didn't really do anything in this game. And just that it was a really good, secondary group of Lions players that stepped up. And the way I feel about this club big picture and how optimistic I am, the young core got ushered in. If the Lions win next week, and I want them to, it will be frustrating thinking, man, that really could have been us. But big picture, and I'll talk about this a lot more during the postmortem, I am pretty darn satisfied. I was surprised looking at the Gary Ayers votes that Lachie Neale got 9. I didn't think he was that great. I thought he was okay. I considered putting him in my votes. I didn't. There was one very notable absence from the votes.
I was wondering if he was going to get all the love or none, and the answer was none. So I don't know if that's any Brownlow foreshadowing or not, because Cameron Rayner somehow was left out altogether when the guys who really put the team on their fucking backs, like Ray Jennings,
I put a team on my fucking back, dude.
were Kai Lohman and Cam Rayner.
And Zach Bailey, I thought. Bailey had a couple of derpy moments. One where he got run down by Tom Stewart, which was a heroic play. Tom Stewart deserved to win this game. I thought Patrick Dangerfield was pretty strong again, despite some butterfingers. But I really liked the way Zach Bailey played. This was unequivocally his best game of the year. Not just in that normal half-forward role, but he managed to bring himself in as that extra support in the defensive 50, and he was just really good at this game. It wasn't like Dunkley was anything special. McCluggage was decent, but I've seen much bigger games out of him. But Zach Bailey, who was really an afterthought all season, really stepped it up. Combine that with Rayner, and then I did take exception to some of Geelong's forward entry strategy, which I thought was pretty bad.
Would the proper word be Melbourne-esque?
Kind of. I mean, they weren't bombing it in from as far out necessarily, but this is not a team that's going to work against if Jack Payne has a slightly decent game. And maybe they thought, oh yeah, Jack Payne's just going to shit the bed against us like last time. He didn't. He was decent. Brandon Starcevich was really good. Noah Answorth was sharp. Harris Andrews was really good. Ryan Lester, I thought, was decent. Got a lot of love from the coaches when my attention turned much more to Starcevich and Andrews. And they just kept trying to bomb it in. Even in the second quarter, it wasn't working. The only way they were getting goals off of it was that if it spilled off of a pack or someone was waiting in the back for the ball to come through. Because this team, up until that last push, couldn't take a contested mark in the forward 50. And it's would you be surprised that second quarter was Brad Close's most active?
If you know anything about Geelong, the answer is no. Meanwhile, against this Lions team, going with that high strategy is really not the move, because obviously they've got the talls. Jack Payne able to play through the full game fine again. Harris Andrews standing in there as always. And then Brandon Starcevich and Ryan Lester have taken their games to an even greater level in finals, and they were already having excellent seasons in the first place. I love that Lester is getting the attention finally. And if the Lions do manage to win the flag, I feel like he'd be one of the guys for whom I'd be the happiest.
I'd be happiest for Cam Rayner, who he's probably been my favorite Lion from the start. Following as he went through his injury, right after we had really taken a liking to him, I think that just kind of improved our perception of him even more, as weird as that sounds.
Strengthened the bond.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. But the reasons I am okay with this, besides the big picture stuff, is Patrick Dangerfield left it all out there. Tom Stewart left it all out there. Ryan had a monster second quarter, kicked easily the best goal of the round, and had an insane assist, and even got Jared. I don't know. It should be Gerard, but I guess Jared Waitley too.
No, Jared Waitley doesn't piss on airplanes.
True.
I mean, maybe, but he actually uses the receptacle. We're making a Gerard Depardieu reference here.
But yeah, he had this ridiculous soccer assist centering to Ollie Henry in the goal square for a toe tap, and then kicked one from the right pocket after turning around. Kind of got the reaction out of Jeremy Cameron instead. And during that sequence, I was thinking like, oh shit, we're doing this. Everything is coming into place. And then, the second half, just forward entry was very poor. Midfield wasn't very good. You know that Family Guy scene where the doctor uses like the defibrillator and the guy blows up?
I forgot to say clear.
You forgot to say clear. Yeah, that's like after just about every Geelong loss, it's like you forgot to give the ball to Brad Close.
You said that you were either going to be very pleased with or very pissed about the decision to keep Oisin Mullen in. What are your thoughts there?
He was subpar, but not like insanely bad. Jack Bowes was very quiet after being, I thought, brilliant in the Poort game. And Tanner Bruin was really bad. And that surprised me. And while it disappoints me, it's not going to haunt me because he is 22 and I am fully confident in him being a great player long term. And I love that after this offseason, he should have more midfield support. And I'm also going to keep pressing that Hayden Young just belongs with this team.
I was going to say he has the blonde hair and could...
He wants to come home.
This also makes me think, and who knows if I mention him again in the post-Warbs, but it makes me think about another guy who I thought had that headband potential. A younger guy who is now a Premiership player in the VFL. Anybody else remember Cooper White?
I mean, his hair isn't as bright, but I had no recollection of him being a sub in that loss to Carlton last year.
I did because I remember paying attention to him in a preseason outing. Instead, it was another blonde guy who actually did have the headband that only won the Ron Evans medal as Rising Star.
Yeah. Ollie Dempsey started quiet and got more involved as the game went on. He didn't have an amazing final series, but I am so encouraged about him. Same with Lawson Humphreys. This was really one of the only times I thought the game might have looked a little fast for Lawson, who otherwise has been super locked in. It seemed like the pace of the game definitely, and the higher pressure was something that took some adjusting, which makes sense for a young player. And then Sean Manna, I thought this was one of those games where he had a couple of awesome moments that made me wonder why the hell has he not gotten his opportunity? And then he had a couple where he was playing before he thought, which that's his downfall. It's not enough of a downfall that he should have been struggling this long to get onto an AFL list. I fully believe that he should have had this way sooner. It's obvious within a few seconds that he belongs at this level, but it was not his finest game. He was below 50% efficiency, and I believe he had the most turnovers of anyone on the ground. But really, what I point to, like I said, was down game from Bruin, which let Brisbane kind of get on top in the middle, the forward entries, and not taking advantage early, kicking those 4 early behinds when it probably could have easily been 19-0 or something. Tyson Stengel missing a dribbler early in the third, and then they still got the first goal of the third anyway, but that one stood out to me more than one that Manna missed, where he decided to kick a dribbler instead of try to pick a drop punt, which I'm not sure what the thought process was there.
That's the one that stood out to me, and that's the one that I still think of now, just because it is a kick and drop punt moment. I'm sorry.
In the moment, I noticed the Stengel one much more. Jeremy Cameron missed one or two that he would have liked to have. I do want to give a lot of credit to Ollie Henry for missing the early one and then managing to kick 4. And that early one, he could have easily been in the goal square because I could have called a 50 on Dane Zorko. I get that it's finals, that doesn't usually get called, but still was a little surprising.
Wait a minute. Ollie Henry? You mean that homesick fucker who left because he couldn't win a flag?
I wish I had thought of this at the time. I just made the meme, just slapped the Collingwood logo on, the guy in the mirror saying you go in there and make it about you.
I feel like that's every Big Four fan base.
No, but it's especially Collingwood.
Especially Lisa, but especially Bert.
as much as I will hate on Carlton, I don't see their fans going on about Zach Toohey when Geelong's playing somebody else.
They went on about it as he was retiring, and now, yes, he is retired, as is Tom Hawkins.
I thought Toohey was going to stay in the sub role. Mitch Duncan was the sub, and I liked the move. I liked the idea of it. And unfortunately, he did not deliver. He had a couple of pretty bad moments late in this game. After the go-ahead goal, has a handball that Will Ashcroft swipes, leads to a Cam Rayner goal that's 2 in 27 seconds and basically puts it away. And then he gets run down by Jack Payne, who is not a guy you should be getting run down by. And after the game, Duncan looked probably the most upset out of anyone out there. And I have to wonder if this is it for him. On one hand, I kind of hope it is, because if this is a sign of what's to come, I wouldn't want him to be a shell of himself. And I will certainly remember him much more as a player that 2021 through 23, like, we desperately needed in the team in order to win. On the other hand, I hope that he gets to go out on a better note than this. Again, I was surprised that the change was just Toohey out, Stewart in. Was really surprised that Mullen was in there and that he wasn't used really as much of a tagger. I would have liked to see him on Lachie Neale more, who easily the best game he's played against Geelong. I don't think he was that great because he wasn't super efficient.
But that's a pretty low bar to clear.
Yeah, but he got 12 clearances and his speed out of the middle was definitely on display, and he had some individual moments like that, even if they weren't the ones that you remember within the course of this game. You look at his overall impact, and it certainly was more positive than he had been in prior matchups. And I just would have liked to have someone on him like that on center bounces. I did love the way Patrick Dangerfield took over at times and won a few of those center clearances and kind of was just saying, everyone get on, I'm taking us there.
Honestly, I just realized it's almost good that he didn't end up winning this flag, because isn't it the Geelong thing that as soon as you win the flag as a captain, you retire now?
Yeah.
It's happened now the last 3 times, because Tom Harley won 2 as captain. So yeah, Harley in 09, then Ling and Selwood. Oh yeah, and Tom Harley will be in the grand final. He is the CEO of the Sydney Swans, if you don't recall.
Oh. But it would have been cool, because a couple years ago, Dangerfield kind of, is kind of there behind Selwood, giddy up, we're going to the flag.
That was line.
That was your line?
I'm the one who made that meme. Giddy up, Skip, take me to the flag.
But I am much more confident in Patrick Dangerfield's ability to be a premiership captain than I was last year. Because there were a lot of times last year where it was nobody stepped up, nobody was that leadership guy. And I saw that just in the way he left it all out there.
This feels very, very weird to me thinking about this, just in the context of the fact that this was a team that started 7-0, and yet it never had that same flag feeling as 2022 did. I don't want to call it peaking too early, but you get it.
I don't think they peaked too early, because during that 7-0 stretch, I don't think they had been especially great in most of those games. But especially after watching Friday's game, it really just feels like this is the Swans' year, and they're definitely going to get a more banged up and weathered team. Oscar McInerney, his shoulder wasn't in position.
Unit lost.
And he came out of the game after definitely getting the better of Reece Stanley early.
I thought that was going to be a significant inflection point, and it was an inflection point, but not as detrimental to the Lions, because the rest of the team in the middle stepped up. They were able to generate a lot of clearances without him.
Lions ended up +10 in stoppage clearances anyway, and credit to Joe Danaher for doing enough as a backup ruck, even though Reece Stanley racked up 45 hitouts. Do you remember I had said, we had that stat about how good Geelong are when nobody gets to 30 disposals? And yeah, that happened again here. But I said, this team's really good when the opposing ruckman gets 50 hitouts, as was the case in the qualifying final. And instead, Reece Stanley ended up with 45 hitouts. Unfortunate, his miss in the final 30 seconds, would it have affected things? Probably not. It would have taken the miracle of miracles, what Poort did to Hawthorn and then some.
Exactly. I was thinking it was the exact same thing.
But it would have been nice to have the chance, and it's unfortunate if that's going to be his last kick in hoops. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I want to give him credit because I was one of his biggest haters for a lot of this year, and he worked his way back into the team, played really well down the stretch, and did something with the little bit he had left in the tank. And I think more than that, if this is it, he was a Premiership ruckman and a pretty good one at that. 2022 was probably his best season with Geelong. And he played like a really valuable role as just like a goofball within this team and a prankster. And he's got a farm like right around the corner from Jeremy Cameron's. You know, you talk about the culture. And he's an important part of it. I'm glad he had a better finish to the year. Again, we'll wait and see with Mitch Duncan. I tell you this with absolute certainty. I could not imagine him playing a game in 2026. And I wouldn't imagine if he stays on for next year, he'd play more than about 15 or 16 home and away games.
Other that we haven't talked about yet, because obviously as the Geelong fan, you're talking a lot about this one, naturally so. I talked about the defensive guys already for Brisbane as a whole. The midfield's obvious. I want to credit Logan Morris, legacy built by Macca's.
Massive bounce back game after getting subbed out for just not really doing anything in the win over the Giants. I mean, the game...
And quite frankly, I thought had Bruce Reville been healthy, he wouldn't have been playing in the first place. Only 6 touches, but 5 marks and 2 goals, couple inside 50s as well. If you have that as a third tall option, that's damn good. And also Eric Hipwood getting into things early with a goal from live play. That felt like that was big for momentum. And Brisbane did eventually seize on that.
I do want to touch on one other Hipwood moment that didn't somehow get noticed much by the broadcasters. Like, Tom Stewart gets called for a free kick against, I think it was Lohman, for completely lawful contact. It was a completely legal bump. And then a couple minutes later, Jack Henry's running for a ball, and Hipwood just fucking clotheslines him, and no call. Like, I thought the umpiring was much worse in the first half than the second half. I thought it was okay in the second half. It was definitely the better umpire to the two prelims, but there were some head-scratching moments. I was surprised he didn't mention Cal Achi. I want to give him credit. Second week in a row, he's been really good.
He was the guy I was about to mention because I have been one of his biggest supporters for the whole year, and honestly longer than that. So yeah, thanks there. He ended up playing on Tom Stewart, and very well done. 3 goals from 11 and 2 assists as well. I mean, this is the value that this guy has just as a bulky aerial competitor. Maybe not the cleanest ground player, but this is a team that does well in the chaos, and even if he doesn't seem like a chaos player on the ground, he does enough to advance things. He's going to be a very valuable one between the wing and half-forward flank in this grand final. And you have to do a lot more of that job this year. Noticed a lot more this year because of the absences of a couple other figures, particularly Lincoln McCarthy. Because you think about what the Lions actually lost going into, I guess it was during round 8, of course, the Logan Morris debut in the Sunday Q Clash. Keep that, by the way, Sunday Q Clash. They weren't faced by that. Their depth showed. Then they got Ashcroft back from his ACL. And here they are, grand finalists for the second straight year, coming from 5th to do it. We knew it was going to take a substantial effort, even more so than normal. Once they dropped that round 23 game to Collingwood, they did it. They're back.
I think the stuff you said about chaos kind of ties in. Like, one team did a better job than the other of getting the small forwards involved at ground level, which was one of the biggest deciding factors in this game. Both teams had success when they did it, and the Lions ended up doing it more, and especially in the fourth quarter. Also, they talked about that stat, like Brisbane don't lose when they get to 100 marks. 111 to 64. They totally controlled uncontested play.
And a lot of that started from those poor entry kicks from Geelong and just being ready for them. And that was a total team effort there, and nobody for the Lions had more than 8 marks.
Sometimes uncontested possession numbers are just meaningless statistical noise. It was meaningful in the flow of this game. And again, this was a team that 2 weeks ago against Poort did a great job of controlling it and couldn't do that here. You mentioned what Achi did against Tom Stewart, but I do think Tom Stewart was awesome in this game, both in a midfield role and in an intercept role. Like, you really couldn't have asked for any more out of him. 12 intercepts, 7 score launches, 11 contested possessions out of his 22. I mean, the only thing he really didn't do was play forward. How is he not in the coach's votes? That's confusing.
Having said that, I would say Archie won the battle.
Also want to give credit to Jack Henry because he was shutting down Joe Danaher until, other than when Danaher had to kind of jump in and be the ruckman. The other Brisbane forwards did a lot here, much more than Danaher in terms of actual forward play. Danaher made sure that Reece Stanley couldn't just get a bunch of hitouts to advantage. Out of his 45 hitouts, only 9 were to advantage. Big credit to Danaher on not letting him do that. Danaher was more interested. I thought there was good strategy to this. He was more interested in just not letting Stanley get hitouts to advantage than actually getting the hitout himself, and was more interested in just like, if he could get himself into position to just catch it and then yeet it out of there kind of Rowan Marshall-y. Also, Zach Guthrie, that if the Cats had finished off this comeback, Zach Guthrie would have gotten a ton of credit because he ended up with 11 intercepts and really kept the dam from bursting in the fourth quarter and was one of the reasons this was winnable altogether. I was surprised on the Fox Footy player ratings that they were low on Mark Blitzovs, because I thought while his disposal numbers are never high, I thought he was solid in this game, and Champion Data seemed to agree with me.
Thinking ahead, the thing I like about this grand final matchup is you've got two teams who are very good at both pushing the button in terms of chaos and rolling things back. I think they can both switch gears pretty well. Ideally, this will be a grand final where just kind of the pendulum swings back and forth. Each team has their 10 to 15 minute phases where they control things, and then that gets wrested from them, and whoever is able to keep their wits about them better ought to win the flag. And I'm very interested in seeing dueling goal celebrations from Tom Papley and Kyle Lohman.
I really hope they play the goal songs to really piss off the purists. I guess Sydney doesn't really have goal songs. They just kind of have a general EDM playlist.
I don't think they played them for Brisbane last year.
No, but I would expect if Charlie Cameron gets one, the fans at least will get into it.
I mean, they did in the road Q Clash,
which was awesome. Huge credit to just generally speaking, the Brisbane's depth players lifting. After Ollie Henry kicks the go-ahead goal, and I'm thinking oh my God, we might actually do this. Who got the clearance that set up Brisbane's immediate answer to retake the lead for good? Noah Answorth. And on one hand, you think to yourself, really? That's the guy who beat you? But on the other, it's well, they've got all these big-time stars and you shut them down. Credit to a guy who's not really a clearance player getting that one.
Not really a clearance player. Yeah, that was his 16th on the season. He's had no more than 4 in a game, and actually the 4 came against Geelong in that round 6 loss. Answorth has had a hell of a final series in terms of bringing the tackle pressure, supporting Starcevich on the small end. 8 marks, 8 tackles in this one, and another one of those unsung players. Awards, main character, I have no idea. Let's go with that first, because I have no idea. Main character over these prelims. It's not Ken Hinckley again, obviously. I mean, yeah, he didn't do anything that noteworthy. I mean, the go-ahead goal was Chi, but I just had to check that because I didn't remember that it was his. I remember the 2 Rayner goals a hell of a lot more. Yeah, same. Is Cam Rayner your main character? I don't think so. It might just be Hinckley again, because there was certainly a lot of commentary surrounding him online after their game. I don't like the thought of him being the main character 2 weeks in a row, but he didn't really do anything this time. That's still fallout from the first one. I know. We may have to crowdsource this. I do feel very strongly about both week and goal of the week, though. These are both very obvious, actually. Mark of the week is going to be Kai Lohman's hanger over Zach Guthrie early in the second quarter. Brisbane had a bunch of really good marks in this game where you just kind of have to throw up your hands and say, well, shit, let's try to make the next play. Before we do goal of the week, assist of the week goes to Brian Messi. The toe tap from the corner to set up Ollie Henry to kind of one-time it in. The only thing missing from that moment was a British guy going, look at what it means to them. But, goal of the week
is later in that quarter. Ryan intercepting the Dane Zorgo handball and kicking from the right pocket.
He's not the main character, but he had the best moments for Geelong.
He was definitely the main character of the second quarter.
Honestly, the one guy that stands out to me the most is Cam Rayner over these 2 games.
Can we leave it up to a vote somehow? I mean, like, you want to, without even putting a poll, ask people who was the main character. I think it might still be Ken Hinckley, just especially now that, he continues to extend the record of most games coached without a grand final appearance, and that he made it most games. He passed Mark Williams for most games coached at Poort this week. I think it might just have to be Ken Hinckley again.
I don't like that, but I will ask the masses.
I don't feel great about.
By the way, the Norm Smith medalist is not automatically the main character for the grand final because it sure wasn't last year.
No, main character was, Nick Dacos?
Nah, it was Fly.
Oh yeah, duh. He had sex 9 months before. He was the main character, even though Bobby won the Norm Smith, and deservedly so. I'm glad they got that right.
Oh yeah, I think it was unanimous, actually.
Yeah, and it was correct. Anyway.
Well, we'll see who Stevie Johnson's presenting the medal to this year.
Can you go back and parse through some of the previews? Because I think I did actually call this grand final matchup, didn't I?
I might have to go way back early in the season, and we'll see what time I have this week. It's an all busy one for me.
I think this was my pick for the grand final, either this year or last year. Definitely one of the two, and I want to say it was this year.
Ethan will go check on that. You can find him at Castle Media. You can find me at BenjaminHK01.
You can find Brian Harambe on Instagram at cat named Brian, and you're about to find him eating some gabagool. Wow, that didn't wake him up. He must be really out of it. Oh, now he's looking at me.
Those are his churro treats. The ones that you see advertised at Dodgers games.
Not a sponsor. Could be a sponsor.
We're at Americans Footy for everything. Brownlow Night's going to be done by the time you're going to hear this, but America's Brownlow Night might not be premiering, hopefully, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, Tuesday night. For Americans, that's 5 a.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific.
And then, we'll also have some, even if you don't want to watch the whole show, I think at least you will want to check out how we voted, how we see the game compared to the umpires, as well as the coaches' votes. And I just look forward to taking that all in. And even as much as I may complain about some of the voting and the pacing of the ceremony, Brownlow Night is really fun. Chance to also show off some of the players' personalities and ask them what they think about North Korea.
I'll just move North Korea.